pride at Tassajara. I don't know if they still do it. I mean, it was a young person's practice of, it came out of, it would be really, really, really cold, and people would get their t-shirts wet to see if they could heat up their t-shirts with their body heat, you know, it's like. So here we are, trying to stay warm in the midst of an amazing autumn day. That wasn't an official practice. That was people thinking that's what the ancient Zen teachings said. So in a few moments, our Shuso is going to talk, but I'm going to say a few things first, because I know she's really anxious and wants to get on with it. I'm teasing her. I'm teasing all of us. First of all, an announcement that Susan Spencer has an art show up in the assisted living portion of Friend's House, and there's going to be a reception Friday from 2 to 3:30, but the show itself is up till December 1st, and I know that she would love to see people.
It's really easy to get there. There's good parking. You just, yeah, it's easy.
She loves the Sangha, and it's important for her to know that we love her back.
And can I say something? If you don't remember what Chris said, but you want information about it, you can email me, or I think Shelley's put something in the newsletter, right?
Okay.
Or
It's on the
website.
It's on the website.
Something on the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah. But
You
Marianne
can email me because I know all about
and Sherry too would be a good source.
it. Yeah, Sherry too.
Let's put up for just a minute the Norman Fisher's translations of the 7 points and 59 slogans for generating compassion and resilience. I don't know if you guys here in the room can see it. No. No. Well, you guys on the screen can see it. No. It's on the website, and we're sending it out in the newsletter. We're using Norman Fisher's Training in Compassion Zen Teachings on the Practice of Lojong as the primary text. And Zazen. Zazen is such an amazing practice. These slogans are very, very practical. I think we can take them down since people can't see them here. But you guys saw them. And now they're looking at them, and now we took them away. So now you'll have to go looking for them again. But anyway, you can find them. It's like the precepts. We are so conditioned because of our dualistic mind, right, wrong, good, bad. I got it right, I got it wrong, therefore I'm a bad person. Things that happen that are bad are wrong and shouldn't have happened, and we know how we can spin in that. And then all our ancient twisted karma and our conditioning and the slogans are there. They're mirrors. They're just amazing. They're like the precepts. But they're from the Tibetan tradition. Just things to help us look in the mirror and say, oh, this is just where human beings get confused. And we, across time and space, offer this to you as possibilities that you could take up these slogans as trainings to help your mind become more resilient and more compassionate. But if you think that's all that's going on, then you think it's all about self-power. Somebody sent me an email about this today. It's like, I'm going to try really, really hard. I'm going to get this right. And if I don't get it right, then I got it wrong. And there's also something called other power, which is a swinging gate. Zazen is beautiful. It takes self-power to get yourself to the cushion, to get yourself to Sangha. You keep coming back. But when we sit down, we give ourselves into an ancient posture and an ancient practice that resonates across time and space, and we can feel it. It's a felt sense of oneness, of interconnection, of alive, of timelessness, boundlessness. But you can't grasp it. I mean, I can use those words. You can have a sense of what I'm saying. But that's the swinging gate that we're practicing with here, which is relative compassion, waking up in this very world, and absolute compassion of it's already here, and our job is to just keep coming home to it and remembering it. So I just want to read a couple of things, and then Gretchen is going to take us into point number 2, which is transform bad circumstances into the path. I was thinking, and I'm a little facetious when I say this, but there is some part of me, and trust me, I don't like bad circumstances, and I don't like what's happening in the world, and I mean, let's not skip that part. But there's also some part of me, the bodhisattva part of me kind of goes, oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. Oh boy, there's a lot to work with here. And we'll start with my own state of mind over and over. And because my state of mind is your state of mind, which is the whole world, which is, we're in trouble. No, sorry. So I thought I would just, we're going to do more on Tonglen. We did a little bit on Tuesday. We're going to do more at the all-day sit, which is November 10th. We'll practice with it more. But I wanted to read from this just a little part called equality practice. It's like, what's the point of this? What are we doing here? Equality practice is a way of connecting with others and realizing that you and they are in the same boat. It is a simple human truth that everyone, just like you, wants to be happy and to avoid suffering. Just like you, everyone else wants to have friends, to be accepted and loved, to be respected and valued for their unique qualities, to be healthy and to feel comfortable with themselves. Put that in for a minute. Everybody, across time and space, including those others. We're making others. Just like you, no one else wants to be friendless and alone, to be looked down upon by others, to be sick and to feel inadequate and depressed. The equality practice is simply to remember this fact whenever you meet another person. You think, just like me, she wants to be happy. She doesn't want to suffer. You might choose to practice this for a whole day, or maybe just for an hour, or for 15 minutes, or for your whole life, which is the cultivating the arising of bodhicitta. I went to Norman Fisher's source books. That I realized, of course, that his book came out of, particularly he named Jampong Kong Truls, my apologies for mispronouncing, translated by Ken MacLeod, who is, I've read his translations before, they're beautiful. And I just wanted to, the way it's translated, I think both by Pema and Trungpa and Norman, this point 3, transform bad circumstances into the path. Here, the translation is the transformation of adversity into the path of awakening. When misfortune fills the world and its inhabitants. Sound familiar? When misfortune fills the world and its inhabitants, make adversity the path of awakening. When your world is full of pain and suffering, troublesome people create difficulties, and so on. You must change the adverse conditions in which you find yourself into the path of awakening. And there are six wonderful points in this section. I think I'll bring up one on Tuesday, but our Shoe is going to bring forward one today. So please help us. Help us transform adversity into the path of awakening.
Sorry. Doing double duty again, but not for long. Okay, so again, I hope I'm loud enough to be heard.
It could be louder.
Thank you. And okay. So, slogan 12, drive all blames into one.
I just want to make sure, are you spotlighted, Gretchen?
Yes, yes I
Okay.
am.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
And
Okay.
getting nods from afar.
Okay.
The tendency to blame is deeply embedded in our humanness.
Can you say the point again, loud and clear, what it is?
Okay. Slogan number 12, drive all blames into one. The tendency to blame is deeply embedded in our humanness and everyday consciousness. This slogan advises us to drive all blames into one. What does this mean? We lay blame on those whose actions we think created the situation that we are angry about and suffering from, forgetting that myriad causes and conditions going back through all time led to this moment and the situation we are reacting to. We want things to go our way. As we cling to our self-centeredness, we want to be right and feel good about ourselves and get what we feel we deserve. We are conditioned to believe that we are a separate self. We look at most situations with the lens of what's in it for me. That's the way we think we must live if we are to succeed and feel like a winner in the game of life. So when things happen that thwart our plans, we look for someone or something to blame to ease our suffering. If and when we can let go of that illusion of a separate self, we can stop playing the blame game. This letting go is not easy and not all or nothing. Of course, we continue to try to keep our bodies safe, healthy, and sheltered, our minds functioning and free of confusion, and our hearts known and knowing, loving and loved. I'll be reading from some of what Trungpa Rinpoche and Judith Leaf have written about this slogan and its meaning. From Trungpa, we know that meditation and everyday experience, we know from meditation and everyday experience that people, places, events, and things are empty of any permanent definition, value, function, and meaning until we assign those false attributes, those fictional characteristics to them. Therefore, if something seems uncomfortable or difficult or anger-provoking, there is only one person to blame for the discomfort, difficulty, or anger: oneself. Our suffering is never anyone else's fault. This is certainly counterintuitive. Our habit of complaining and whining and finding fault outside of ourselves is very strong, far stronger than the alternative, to be present with what is happening with an open heart and mind, free of judgment, and trusting in ourselves that if we look honestly and clearly, we will do right. Faulting and blaming others is, as we all know, easy and convenient, but it is also seriously flawed as a way of life and ultimately counterproductive. It keeps us off the path, not on it. When things in our society aren't the way we think they should be, our first line of reason is to determine who is responsible, who is to blame. With little or no evidence to support us, we simply blame or accuse another person or group for what we feel is wrong. At times, it is the person or group who is accusing us of exactly the same wrongdoing. But no matter, after all, we're right. Take religious or nationalistic conflicts. Both sides feel they are right and correct in blaming the other. The flaw in this way of reasoning is the assumption that I am always right. It's the flaw that assures me others are to blame. When we look closely, however, we observe that there is no absolute right or wrong. Similarly, when things in our personal lives aren't the way we think they should be, the first thing we do is to look for someone to blame. What makes this such a dangerous and maladaptive way of living is that it never works. Blaming never solves the problem. Why? Because blaming others never gets at the cause, and the cause is never external. The cause of our suffering is always internal, always in the way we choose to narrate the event. What mindfulness is suggesting is that as we go about our lives, the moment we sense fault or blame arising, we tell ourselves to come to a screeching halt. We look inward instead of outward, and we notice that our suffering is coming not from what others are doing or the external situation, but from how we have chosen to write the narrative about those people and conditions. He goes on to say, everything is based on our own uptightness, kind of an old word. We could blame the organization, we could blame the government, we could blame the food, we could blame the highways, we could blame our own motor cars, our own clothes, we could blame an infinite variety of things. But it is we who are not letting go, not developing enough warmth and sympathy, which makes us problematic. So we cannot blame anybody. This slogan applies whether we complain about anything, even that our coffee is cold or our bathroom is dirty. It goes very far. Everything is due to our own uptightness, so to speak, which is known as ego holding, ego fixation. Since we are so uptight about ourselves, that makes us very vulnerable at the same time. We get hit, but nobody means to hit us. We are actually inviting the bullets. We live in a society and world filled with blames and complaints of all kinds. When something goes wrong, this is Judith Leaf now, kind of a different voice. When something goes wrong, there is always something going wrong. We look for someone to blame. If we can't find who is responsible, and our urge to blame is still lingering around, we choose someone willy-nilly. Could be anyone, fill in the blanks. It's the Republicans, women drivers, husbands, kids, corporations. It is true that if we are trying to solve a problem, we need to uncover its source to discover who or what is responsible, like a plane crash. But that is pragmatic and gives us a way to correct the problem. But our attempt to find someone to blame is often not at all that straightforward and not very helpful either. Think of all the intractable, seemingly never-ending conflicts in the world with no solution in sight, and each side convinced they are right. And it goes on and on. The same pattern occurs in the small conflicts of daily life, from the playground to the family to the workplace. The blaming game is continuous. It has a life of its own and leads nowhere. Conveniently, blaming others allows us to avoid looking into our own role in the problems and conflicts we encounter. We look outward, but we do not look within. And even in looking outward, once we have assigned the blame, we go no further. We do not get to the root of the problem. We stop short, satisfied that we are off the hook and someone else is at fault. This slogan is quite radical. Instead of blaming others, you blame yourself. Even if it's not your fault, you take the blame. It is important to distinguish this practice from neurotic self-blaming or the regretful fixation on your own mistakes, like I do, and how much you are at fault. It also does not imply you should not point out wrongdoing or blow the whistle on corruption. Instead, as you go about your life, you simply notice the urge to blame others and you reverse it. When you decide to drive all blames into the one place you can control, you stop all the unhelpful musings about why it's happening and simply do something about it. So you take the blame into yourself, absorb the chaos and defensiveness, and focus on right action. Again, driving all blames into the ego is not the same as blaming ourselves. We recognize that the ego and our self-centered attachments are to blame, and these things do not define us. To put it bluntly, there is no self in the way our culture believes. It's not your fault in that you didn't choose this conditioning, this background. You didn't choose the trauma your parents went through or your culture went through. You didn't choose the bias, racism, sexism, and so on that permeates our cultures. You didn't choose to be here at this unbelievable time of environmental change and crisis. And yet, here you are. Adversity and misfortunes are opportunities to develop patience and equanimity. By accepting challenges without resentment, we can strengthen our minds and progress on the path. Trungpa gives this example. I return to my parked car and it has a dent. I can charge the person who did it, and that person seems truly to blame for my suffering, the dent in my nice new car. In my mind, I could have isolated this person. I have isolated this person. It's a sure bet that I am looking at the person who dented my car as an intrinsic, autonomous entity. And in this way, I feed the fires of my indignation and self-righteousness. What is the real issue here? Was I at fault in this particular context? Both the law and my insurance company would say that I was not. Someone has damaged a possession of mine, and I have no freedom to choose whether or not I experience this particular circumstance. On a deep level, I have stacked the cards to experience this through my own previous actions. But here lies the freedom. How do I respond? The dent in the car has no power to cause me any suffering unless I yield to it. The dent is only an external catalyst, a contributing circumstance, but by itself it is not sufficient to cause me suffering. The suffering actually arises from the stuff of my own mind. If I were mindless, there would be no suffering, but that is not an option. I cannot decide to reject my mind. Instead, I must apply my intelligence. What element of my mind was responsible for my suffering? The real source of my suffering is self-centeredness, my car, my possession, my well-being. So here's a couple of my own driving experiences in driving all blames to ponder. I was coming home from Sangha one dark evening last spring, driving and talking with my sister on the phone, and noticed that she was getting upset, and I became worried, unsure how to deal with her fear, when suddenly there was a loud cracking sound. I thought someone was shooting at the car. I kept driving, didn't tell her, finished the call as calmly as I could, got home and saw the damage on the windshield, and I called the non-emergency line of the sheriff department. I told them that I thought someone had been shooting at my car. They said that most likely a passing car had kicked up a stone that had hit my windshield. Really? I said. It had been so loud. They asked how fast I was driving, which, yeah, I told them, and reminded me that my speed had made the stone hit with a great deal of force. When I mentioned it later to my therapist, she was skeptical of my sense that I very much had a part of what had happened, remembering the stress I had been feeling and how that affected how fast I was driving and where I was on the road. I was sure that had I been in a different mood, the stone would not have hit the car at all. For now, I have a tiny flaw in the windshield just above eye level. Looks like a little mosquito shape. Another one. On an extremely hot day, I decided to park in the shade under the overhead structure in the parking lot where my grief group was held. I thought I had figured it right, pulling into the stall, but suddenly, bam, the sensor alarm went off and the car hit the support pole. I backed up a little and saw white paint on it, which I could tell had come from my car. I drove to another stall, got out, and saw the ding on the car. I also noticed that support poles were oddly placed, not at the end of the stall, but partway in, which I hadn't noticed initially. Had they been where I thought they were, there would have been no problem, perhaps. The facilitator in the group said that parking lot was badly designed and that people had trouble with it all the time. So, which driving was my fault? Which incident wasn't my fault? No more perfect new car for sure. Yeah. So I think Norman Fisher puts it best. To follow this slogan, whatever happens, don't ever blame anyone or anything else. Always only blame yourself. Blaming ourselves, which seems to be what the slogan is recommended, is not exactly blaming ourselves in the ordinary sense. You can't blame anyone for what happens, even if it's actually someone's fault. It may be their fault, but you can't really blame them. Something happened, and since it did, there is nothing else to be done but to make use of it. Everything that happens, disastrous as it may be, and no matter whose fault it is, it has a potential benefit, no matter how bad it may seem at first. That's the nature of something happening, that it has a potential benefit, and it's your job to find out how to turn it into a benefit. It means that you take the full appreciation and full responsibility for everything that arises in your life, no matter whose fault. We say, this is very bad. This is not what I wanted. This brings many attendant problems, but what are you going to do with it? What can you learn from it? How can you make use of it for the path? These are the questions to ask. The important point is to accept that what has happened has actually happened. You accept reality, you accept responsibility, and you figure out what to do next. Here you are. This is it. It is not some other way. It is this way. There is no way to go forward, and there is no way to go but forward into the next moment. Thanks.
Felt like there was a lot of emotion there towards the end. Part of it was relief that you got to the end. But the other part is what is this is training in compassion. What comes up with all of this, Gretchen?
It just feels so true, that last bit.
Which last bit?
There's no way to go but forward. No way. Where?
And how's that feel? There's no way to go but forward.
It's real. It feels like a gift.
So just say a little, and what's the gift?
What's the gift? I'm not finding words for that right now.
What's it have to do with compassion?
It's kind of like you can't do anything any other place. Compassion can only happen when you're open in that way, I guess. Being in the here and now, I guess.
Shall we ask people to take this into small groups?
Let's
Maybe,
do.
what if we do groups of 3 and people just have a conversation about this, about what arises, including, if you tell me to drive all blames into one, that my little self wants to fight with you. And there's wisdom here.